Hey again, third grade. All right, we are going to be looking in our On the Bright Side reading book. So take out On the Bright Side. I'm going to have you read pages 78 and 79. It's a poem by Isaac Watts. It's also a song that we would sing in church many times. You might not know it because it's not one that we've sung recently, but it's an old time hymn. But it's a beautiful poem and a beautiful song. So we look at the beauty of the sunsets, the sky full of stars, and we can't help but think of the Creator that created all those wonderful things. So I sing the mighty power of God. And it's a song of praise that Isaac Watts wrote to the Lord to thank him for all the beautiful things that he made. So I want you to go ahead and read through that and then answer the questions on page 79. But I want to go ahead and read with you because this is one of my favorite stories. It's just a very interesting one. When you hear the word Braille, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that word. I think some of you have probably heard that before. I'm not sure. But maybe you've heard of it and you kind of know what it's all about. Well, this next story is about a boy named Louis Braille, and he made a famous invention. And maybe you can figure out what it is just because of what I'm talking about right now. Okay, so we're going to kind of learn about what he invented and why he invented it. It's a very interesting story. So our dig deeper at the top of page 80, it's a reminder of what we've already been talking about. We've been focused on biographies and autobiographies. And so a biography is what did we say? Do you remember? Because the biography is a true story of somebody's life, but what is the difference between biography and autobiography? True story of a person's life, biography by somebody else, right? So a biography, you write about my life. That's a scary thought because I don't know what you'd write about. But if you wrote about Miss Monroe's life, you tell, she was a crazy teacher, I hated her, whatever you wanted to write about my life, what you saw, she has a dog that lives with her and whatever. If you're writing a story about my life, you're writing a biography. But if I decide to write the truth, I have a crazy dog and I'm normal and whatever, that is an autobiography. I'm writing it about myself. Okay, so when you write about yourself, it's an autobiography. When somebody writes about you, that is a biography. So we're going to look carefully to discover if this true story that was written is a biography or an autobiography. So again, if it's a biography, then what is it going to have? It's going to have written by somebody else, right? The true story of Miss Monroe's life written by one of you, okay? You can put your name in there, okay? But if it's an autobiography, I'm going to say the true story of Miss Monroe's life by Miss Monroe, okay? So that'll be your hint as to whether this is a biography or an autobiography. So some of our words to watch for, you can look at those there: Braille, rearranging, familiar, immediately, and then all, AWL, all. It's a small pointed tool for making holes in leather or wood. And when you have a belt and it has the holes in it, it's an awl that is used to poke those holes through that belt. So it's got to be really sharp and strong enough to get holes through that leather, through that wood even, okay? All because of an awl. And this is by Dolores Shimon. You have your idea right already? One cold, wintry morning, another son was born at the home of the village harness maker. I am the best harness maker in France, said Mr. Braille, but Louis will not be a harness maker. Our son Louis shall be a professor. So he's a harness maker, and obviously back then they didn't have cars and things like we do today. So he would make harnesses for the horses, which means he's able to get, the leather and get the awl so that you can have the bridle and all the bits and parts and, the harness and straps and all of those things that are needed. But he was determined, my son is not going to be a harness maker. He's going to be a professor. As Louis grew, his sparkling blue eyes missed nothing, and he found many interesting things for a boy to do. Louis especially liked the times he spent playing in the harness shop while his father was working. His father gave him scraps of leather, which the little boy enjoyed arranging and rearranging. Sometimes he pretended they were cows in a pasture. Other times they were soldiers marching in straight lines. One bright summer day when Louis was 3 years old, he was busy playing with his scraps of leather. He wanted to make a harness like his father's. He stepped over to his father's bench and took a little awl, a long pointed tool, which we talked about, that he was forbidden to play with. Louis tried to punch a hole in a scrap of leather, but the leather was tough and the awl would not go through. Louis pushed harder. The awl slipped and pierced his eye. I read this every time and it makes me cringe because that thought is a horrible, horrible thought. I can't imagine what this little 3-year-old boy went through, and I can't imagine what his parents went through dealing with that. So what was it that caused his injury? The awl. It slipped through and got his eye. Louis's injured eye became infected. Then things began to look blurry through his other eye. So the eye that the awl went through, that became infected, but then it transferred, and now things are starting to look blurry through that eye. One morning, Louis could hear the birds singing outside while it was still dark. It would always be dark for Louis now. He was blind. At first, Louis bumped into many things. As he moved his small fingers inch by inch over familiar things, he discovered a new way to see. But his mother and father knew he could never read books. He could never become a professor. When Louis was 5 years old, a new pastor moved to the village. That was the beginning of a strong friendship. Louis spent many hours listening to his new friend tell stories. Through these stories, Louis learned about the stars, the many animals, and how plants grow. He also listened to stories about kindness, obedience, and courage, stories Louis would never forget. At the age of 7, Louis walked every morning to the village school with his cousin. Louis was soon at the top of most of his classes. He couldn't see the work, guys, but he was at the top of most of his classes. So there's no excuses. When you go, I don't know, it's too hard. No, you can do it. In arithmetic, he often could work a problem in his head as fast as other students could work it out on paper because he had to. But during reading and writing, Louis had nothing to do. Are there no books for me to read? He asked sadly. When he was 10 years old, Louis left the village to go to a school for blind children. He was going to learn to read. But again, he was disappointed. The reading was from books that had raised print. Each letter was raised from the page so that it could be felt with the fingers. Each letter was so large that only a few words could fit on a page. So he's trying to read and the letters are raised like A, D, O, G, W, A, S, a dog was, and then he would have to flip the page and, and read maybe 3 or 4 or 5 more words. And then by the time he got to the end of the sentence, he was like, well, what was the beginning of that sentence? There could only fit a few words on a page. By the time Louis had figured out all of the letters, he often had forgotten the beginning of the sentence. We need a better way to read, said Louis. He could think of nothing else. He tried many times to figure out an alphabet code, but each time he failed. Will I never be able to read books for myself? Only God knows the answer, replied Louis's pastor. Trust him. One day, a captain in the army came to the school. He told how he could send secret messages at night by making dots and dashes on paper. This is it, thought Louis. I can make an alphabet code with dots. Louis worked every spare minute on the new alphabet. Everywhere he went, he had paper and a dull awl for punching dots. He made 6 dots. Then he made every letter from these same 6 dots. It works, cried Louis one summer day as he ran his finger over the 6-dot alphabet. It's so simple, but it works. And it did work. Louis made copies of the alphabet to take back to school. The students were eager to learn this new 6-dot alphabet. One boy was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I have written a sentence. Can you read it? Well, you need to figure out. So they've got the alphabet here on page 85. So go to 85 and see if it will help you to figure out page 84. I want you all to write that in there and see what it says. Let me know what it says. The students began immediately to write down everything the teachers taught them. We can remember so much more, they told Louis, because they're not just listening to it. Now they have it written down and they can go back to it and read over it again. So what a neat thing that Louis did. And by the way, Louis was 15 years old when he developed that 6-dot alphabet. He wasn't a grown man. He wasn't older. He was 15, and he was so determined to be able to read that he discovered and made that alphabet. About 5 years later, Louis was asked to stay at the school for the blind, not as a student, but as a professor. He was able to do exactly what his dad had hoped he would be able to do. He became a professor. You can look at the Braille alphabet there. Because of a sharp awl, Louis became blind. He could not read or write. Because of a dull awl. How interesting. The same tool that caused his blindness, when it was made dull, he was able to use that to help blind people. Because of a dull awl, many blind people are now able to read and write. The way of writing for blind that Louis Braille invented is named after him. It is called Braille. And you can see the statue there of Louis Braille. And then underneath that statue that was made of him, there's the coin. The front side of the coin, it's a silver dollar coin, and it features a portrait of Louis Braille on the front, and then a picture of a child reading a book in Braille on the back. And then the dots that are on there, they're the letters, if you can look up at the front, it's B-R-L, which that means it's the abbreviation for the actual word Braille. So very interesting story, and I had to read that with you because I just think it's really incredible how God used this young boy in a way that his dad had thought, oh, it's done. He can't be a professor now, and God used him to do something really, really great. So I want you to go ahead and answer those questions. I wish I could be asking and getting the answers with you, but look at those. Then look at Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, because that's an important part of this, because we need to trust in the Lord. He knows what's best and he's in control. So something that I just thought would be interesting for you is for you to try. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like putting dots like with glue, like it says in the book, maybe do sequins, but I just thought maybe even if you just kind of made little dots with glue, if you have little like Elmer's glue that you can squeeze out, and try to see if you can make the alphabet yourself and make some words from it that will be, readable or whatever. So just something interesting. But on page 132, you're going to fill in the blanks describing all because of an all. And it's asking whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Remember, fiction means not true, okay? And then nonfiction means it's real. You're going to write the main character. Where's the setting? Where? The setting is where, remember. Story structure. Is it descriptive, describing things, or is it cause and effect, something that happened because of something that happened, kind of a thing? You're going to circle one of those, descriptive or cause and effect. Then how are the stories similar between the discontented pig and the all because of an all, sorry. And then how are these stories different? So you're going to look at the two stories that are on there, because the discontented pig from page 21 and all because of an all from page 80, and you're going to tell why and how they're different. I don't think I had you do the top part, so work on the top part too, the discontented pig, and fill in if it's fiction or nonfiction, who the main character is it descriptive or cause and effect, all of that as well. So think those things through carefully, and I hope that you enjoyed that story as much as I did. That's such a strong story that teaches such a good lesson. Don't give up. You never know what God has in store, even in some of the rough things that we have going on. All right, I'll see you again soon in another video.